Brata, in the rule amendment number 3, no, my elections are checked after 7 years, not 5 years.
So for those of you that want to understand why the Zimbabwean government is giving back 67 farms to Europeans, listen to the Minister of Agriculture.
If we go into the constitution, it says we shall compensate former farm owners, white farmers, for the improvements that they've made on the land. And that is what we are saying, that the improvements that they've made on the land, they must be compensated. The constitution says we must pay BIPA farmers for the compensate them for land and for the improvements. And that's what I said, that those unoccupied BIPA farms, they are 67, and that is what the government is considering.
Now, the two issues that are being brought about by the Minister of Agriculture of Zimbabwe with a selective reading of our constitution and a selective application of law are the two main issues that used to make me criticize the current president of Zimbabwe, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, in 2018 when he came into office. I criticized him because, first of all, he accepted to compensate white farmers for developments on stolen land. It is common legal practice, and it is also common law, that you cannot compensate a thief for, first of all, stealing your property or buying stolen property, and for making any developments on your land, because those developments will be considered vandalism. Instead, what is supposed to happen in legal practice across the world is that the thief is supposed to return the stolen property. They're supposed to compensate you for all the time you didn't have your property. They're supposed to give you damages for any vandalism that has been done on your property, and they're supposed to return any profits, what we call unjust enrichment, that they made off your land. But for some reason in Zimbabwe, under the presidency of a lawyer, they have overlooked all these things to change the law to suit the European white landowners. Number two, President Mnangagwa has then said that he wants to return 67 farms and plantations that were owned by Europeans who either bought them from settlers that stole the land or got them from government which did not compensate the original owners of that land. Now, these farms are being returned because of an agreement that is known as BIPA, or Bilateral Investment Promotion and Protection Acts. These agreements are signed by Europeans with particularly African countries, third world countries, or nations that they colonized or enslaved to protect their property from confiscation and from being nationalized in the event that the black people in that country wake up, or the natives of that country wake up and decide to demand reparations or compensation for colonialism. So when colonialism ended, a lot of European companies and European investors continued to hold huge amounts of lands in the former colonies. In Zimbabwe, the biggest landowner today continues to be the Oppenheimer family and the Queen of England. So to protect these colonial loots, these lands that they got from colonialism, many of them decided to say to our governments, if you want us to continue to invest money in your country, if you want us to continue to create jobs, some of them even bribed our government officials, you need to sign what we call these BIPA agreements. And what these BIPA agreements do is that when one day you decide to expropriate land without compensation, when you decide one day to do land reform, or when you begin to realize that we owe you money and reparations for colonialism and slavery, you must assure us that you will not take our properties and you will not take our land. So this is how our governments signed these BIPA agreements. They then went a step further to ensure that when we are writing our constitutions, they would also influence the process of writing the constitution to protect these BIPA farms and these colonial farms, or the so-called vandalism and development that took place on those lands. If you're following, you're realizing that there's a pattern here. We were colonized by nations that used guns to take over our land, our minerals, and our labor. Then they gave us independence, and then we were colonized by capital and investors who utilized agreements and changing our laws in order for them to take control of stolen land. So you must be wondering, so what happened in Zimbabwe? How did this stolen land become legally owned and protected by BIP agreements? Well, they used the writing of the constitution. What they did is they put Zimbabwe under sanctions when Zimbabwe took its land back from white settlers and gave it back to its people. The sanctions began to deprive people of jobs, healthcare, education, and development. So people started saying, we're going to vote for the opposition. The opposition almost took over in 2008. So because of that near takeover, a GNU government came into effect. That GNU government was influenced by the Europeans who were funding the opposition to say, if you want sanctions to be removed, write a new constitution. And this constitution was influenced by white South Africans, the UNDP, UN Development Program, Europeans, and these are the people that said you must compensate white farmers for developing stolen land and you must give back beeper farms. So it is this manipulation of our constitution that allowed us to be recolonized and have our land taken by legal means and legal instruments. These are the instruments that are now being quoted by the Minister of Agriculture.